Hello and welcome to Zombardment versus Stasis. But before we get into the game, please do let me know if you like these. I usually make deck techs, so this is one of my first gameplay videos, and I really do think your feedback has helped me to improve them. So if you have any other feedback or things you think I should add, please do let me know, and thank you for that. Also, if you'd like to see the deck tech for this video, I have made that. It's on my channel. I do recommend it in this case because it's a little bit of an unusual deck. So this is the deck that I'll be playing. It's called Zombardment. Essentially, we're going to use Tombstone Stairwell to abuse our graveyard and get a lot of sacrifice triggers. And then we also have a zombie theme and the black discard. So that's going to be super helpful against this blue deck. So Stasis here just with an island, and turn 1 island usually means Stasis, although it could mean something else. The second island almost always means Stasis if they don't do anything. So I'm just starting off with a turn 1 aggressive creature. So I'm not sure if this was right. I wanted to try and beat down and get some quick damage in, because usually I think Stasis, they don't play the Stasis on turn 2 most of the time. So I thought I would save my discard for a little bit later, like turn 2 and 3. So here we see the second island, so now I'm thinking it just has to be Stasis, because if it was a different deck like Stiflenaut, the chances that they would just play 2 islands and do nothing is quite low. And so yeah, I play another beatdown creature. And actually, I think in this game I didn't draw any discard, because obviously I didn't know he was playing Stasis, and my starting hand was actually quite reasonable. So I didn't want to mulligan when, you know, I actually have a decent hand. So you can see against many decks this hand would have been very playable. Yep, so Chain of Vapor on the sack, on Carnophage. So this makes me know he's definitely playing Stasis now. And then a Daze on the Carrion Feeder. So I'm not feeling particularly great about this situation because I haven't drawn any discard yet. He also has a lot of cards in hand, and my clock is very, very slow. So yeah, I think I said that I'll take 1 but forgot to do it, so I just did it there. Attack for 2. And really what I need now is a discard spell. Factory is a good land against this deck because it can attack. But it seems as though I haven't drawn any discard, which is really unfortunate. When I play against Stasis, I always feel like I'm on the edge of my seat, because it's a deck that essentially just has a 1-card combo that can come down from nowhere and you just lose on the spot. So it always feels very nerve-wracking to play against Stasis. I know it is a beatable deck, and it's, you know, it's not as bad as people say, but I just have so many memories of this deck from the kitchen table, and just so many times where you think you're so far ahead and then they just play Stasis and it's game over. So really, I really don't like playing against this deck at all. And yep, there is the Stasis that I mentioned. So you can see now I basically can't do anything. And so guys, I've skipped ahead a little bit here because this Stasis was absolutely game over. As you can see, he drew a Forsaken City on his next turn and had a Gush, which can keep Stasis going for a really long time. When I did concede, he revealed his hand full of counterspells, and especially alternate cost counterspells that return islands. So there's really no way with my deck that I was getting out of this, or that I was killing him from the life total that he's on. In sideboarding, I bring in 4 Phyrexia Negators and the extra Cabal Therapy. Negator is very good against control decks that don't deal damage because it's just a big creature. And Cabal Therapy, of course, we want as much discard as possible. That's the way that we're going to actually win this matchup, is by destroying our opponent's hand. And the cards I take out, 2 Terminates, obviously completely useless in this matchup. 2 Withered Wretch, I feel it's just a vanilla 2-2, it's a bit slow. and 1 Rotlang Reanimator, because again, it's got good synergy, but it's just very slow in this matchup. So on to game 2, and I will be going first. So I start again with a turn 1 Carnophage. So this is not a bad start. It puts some beat down on early, and like I said, the Stasis deck rarely ever plays a Stasis on turn 2. I mean, it is definitely possible, but it's just unlikely, and with me being on the play, I'm pretty confident playing a turn 1 Carnophage. However, I do definitely want to start discarding that hand now. So let's see. I know that I have discard in my hand this game because I wouldn't have kept a hand that didn't have it against Stasis. Okay, so I go for Withered Wretch. I personally think this was a little bit risky because there is a chance that my opponent could go Forsaken City Stasis. Although usually that doesn't happen. So I kind of just played the odds here. And yep, there it is, Forsaken City. So I'm quite lucky opponent didn't just play the Stasis here, because I think I would have just been dead if he did. So yeah, that was a very, very greedy play by me that actually just luckily paid off. But like I said, usually they don't play the Stasis on turn 2 with Forsaken City. Here we'll see a Duress. Into Arcane Denial. So then I pass the turn and draw 2 more cards. So if I had played that on turn 2, he wouldn't have been able to Arcane Deny it or Daze it. So again, I just really think that was a greedy play by me. Just luckily it worked out. And opponent's in a really rough spot here, having to Arcane Deny his own Bauble to effectively draw 3 cards and just pass the turn. And this is super, super rough because, you know, the Stasis deck, it really needs those islands in play. And end of turn, it doesn't really make any difference, but I just exile something from his graveyard. So this Arcane Denial play is super cool. I've never actually seen someone Arcane Denial their own spell before. So this is actually the first time I've ever seen this. And for some reason I thought it was your opponent draws cards, so here we just discuss it quickly, and he explains to me how it works. Yep, so there we go, Cabal Therapy. I have no idea what I should have named in this situation. Probably either Stasis or Gush, although Gush, because of his mana situation, is not so strong here. Maybe if you're a Stasis player or you've played a lot against Stasis, you can let me know. I'm really not good with these black discard spells, so I often don't name the right thing. So I think for ages, and I believe I named Stasis, missing there, I see 3 copies of Gush, so I think I probably should flash this back here. Although saying that, Gush here, just it puts him quite far behind, but it does allow him to get a Stasis. So again, I just think for absolutely ages here, because, you know, when I play against Stasis, I always feel like very unsure about what to do. So I go with a Negator first, because this will put my opponent on a very fast clock, and if my opponent dazes that, then you know, they're so far back on lands they can't play the Gush, and it really, I did this because I'm trying to essentially bait out the daze, because if I have the Negator in play and the Carnophage, this is it's a 2-turn clock, whereas if he counters the Negator, then it's a 3-turn clock. But remember, days also puts him back a land, so it kind of gives me an extra turn. So the negator resolves, which I am a little bit surprised about. I thought he would counter that. And then I flash back the therapy. So here I would take the 3 gush because he still has, he can essentially play an island, float blue, and then gush and find a stasis and win, which I really don't want to happen. So yeah, I definitely am going to cast that Cabal Therapy. Now here he's in a very difficult position because if he doesn't counter it, I'm going to take all of those gush. And if he does counter it, like you see he just did, now he's back to only having 1 land in play. So now he can't cast those gush anyway, and it's going to be probably too late before he can. So the reason as well that I know it's going to be too late is because I have a Goblin Bombardment in my hand, which we'll see in a second. So I know if I draw any creature that he's just dead this turn. So I start by attacking. So as I know all of his hand except for 1 card, I know that the only counter spells he could really have are foil that would let him counter for free, and actual counter spell, or arcane denial, I suppose. So I'm definitely not really afraid of counter spells here. And yeah, as soon as Goblin Bombardment comes down and it resolves, I'm extremely confident that I've won this game, because now it means my opponent has to not only deal with my stuff in play, but it means he has to counter every single creature I play for the rest of the game. And it also means that he has to somehow remove it before I can draw a manland that he can't counter. So I think for a while here, because I actually do have another creature, but of course obviously I want to play it. Unfortunately, it's an expensive creature that can get dazed. So this forces my opponent to impulse to look for something. Now I did think about this, because if my opponent somehow has a stasis, then you know, all my stuff will be tapped. But I think it was worth it by forcing him to counter my creature. But anyway, he didn't draw his stasis, so yeah, that's just game over. So going into game 3, he starts with an island. I start with a fetch land into a Carrion Feeder. So one thing that's quite nice about Carrion Feeder's ability is if all my other stuff is tapped to a stasis, it means I can sacrifice them to Carrion Feeder to at least get in for a bit more damage. Although obviously it's not quite the clock that I would like it to be. Again, perhaps I should have started with the discard on turn 1. I'm also quite new to playing black decks and discard in general, so I often make mistakes with those cards. I'm almost certain that I had some here, because I would have mulliganed if I didn't. My thinking is that usually they don't play stasis on turn 2. So again, we see that he didn't do it this game either. But I think that way of thinking is wrong, because they definitely can play stasis on turn 2 in a kind of aggro matchup like this and just win the game from there. So I really do think it's a mistake that I don't cast my discard on turn 1. You can let me know in the comments what you would do. You can see here I play some on turn 2. So I definitely had it in my starting hand. So when I play against Stasis, I always, like I keep saying, I feel very on edge, and like I have to think about everything so much, just because they do have this 1-card combo. So I do end up thinking about this for ages. So I fast forwarded here a bit because I did spend ages thinking about it. In the end, I take a gush because he can actually play that one, and I have a second discard spell, so that's why I took the gush. And here I will take Stasis, I'm almost certain of it. And then I pass turn. So I don't really care if he wants to bounce my thing, it's really not that good. And here we have quite an interesting situation because I know his entire hand essentially. He has a counter spell that I know of, but it sets him back to 0 if he actually casts it for its alternative cost. So here we go. I fast forwarded a bit because, like I said, I always spend ages thinking about everything against Stasis. So I just assume you don't want to see those parts. So I just cut that out. And he's thinking about the therapy. So he allows it to resolve. So the reason that I named Chain of Vapor here is because if he actually casts his counterspell, it puts him back to 0. I'm not sure if this was right either. I perhaps should have just taken the counter and had him bounce it, but I didn't want him having any lands because I do actually still have gas in hand, so I would rather put him back to 0. I just, at that time, I wanted to make sure that he's definitely going to go back to 0 lands, because I just didn't want some situation where he can top deck a Stasis or a Gush or something and just start to go off. That's also why I led with the Negator, because I was certain that he would counter it, whereas if I played Reanimator, maybe he wouldn't, and then that would give him, you know, another turn where he can suddenly play the Thwart for its actual mana cost. So again here, thinking about what to do, play another Carrion Feeder. So it seems like that will resolve. And then instantly I sack it because I want to put a bigger clock on. And I attack for 4. So even though I'm not that good with discard spells, luckily I can figure out the clock quite well. I figured that I've got him on a 3-turn clock here. The reason that I didn't sack the Rotlung straight away is because I don't need to. I'd prefer to just keep it in case there's a Stasis or something. But I do need to sack something, so I can deal that extra 1 point of damage. Perhaps it should have been a Rotlung, but I just thought the Carrion Feeder in my hand was a better choice. Because actually now I've got him dead in 2 turns. Next turn I can attack for 7, because I will sack the Rotlung end of turn. Meaning my feeder will be a 3-3, so that's 3 plus 2 plus 2 from the land, so it's a 2-turn clock. Actually, perhaps I didn't even need to sacrifice the Carrion Feeder there, I'm not really sure. So yeah, opponent goes for an Impulse. If a Stasis came down here, I definitely wouldn't sack the Rotlung, because that can turn any Cleric that I draw also into a 2-2, so, you know, that's something that I definitely want to keep. Okay, so because there's no Stasis here, I think I just want to get him dead as quickly as possible. So I find a zombie token. And it's a really good thing that I did that, because I believe that I just drew a land. So I attack for 7. And we've got Impulse in response. So here I feel quite good against Chain of Vapor, because, you know, even if he bounces my Carrion Feeder, it's not super bad. It just slows me down, but, you know, luckily he doesn't have that, so I put him to 7, so he's dead next turn. And like I said, I think I have a land in hand. So here I'm just trying to fade a Stasis. As long as he doesn't draw that, then that should be okay. Or dodge a Stasis, should I say. So let's see. So Impulse. So he's seen a lot of cards, and you know, he doesn't need the Forsaken City. He just needs the Stasis because he does have a lot of islands in hand. Although at this point I start to feel a little bit better because I, you know, even if he does have a land into Stasis, he's completely tapped out, and you know that uses a lot of his islands. Okay, and pass the turn. So even though I've got the win, I do still think about it a little bit. Again, I really find it very nerve-wracking playing against Stasis. And in the end, I actually go for it. And yeah, turns out he has nothing, and that's game. So this matchup, it really feels like it just comes down to the black deck drawing lots and lots of discard or getting a little bit lucky. I did have the Goblin Bombardment, so that's another card that's super strong in this matchup. So thank you for watching and see you next time.